Hello everybody and welcome to Oxford Brookes University and more specifically Brookes Sport's celebration of UK Disability History Month. I'm really lucky today to be sat here with Kit Cutter. He's head of hockey and he's a sports lecturer here at Brookes. Kit, how you doing?
Very well, thank you, Tom.
Thank you so much for coming in. It's really good to have you here. It'd be great to talk to you about health and life sciences and sport and what you guys provide for disabled students.
Yeah, so an interesting one in terms of kind of talking about kind of inclusivity, especially coming from a sport kind of degree program, physical activity, health, kind of inclusivity is a large factor in terms of trying to get more people active, if that makes sense. In terms of then kind of provision on the ground, in terms of making our curriculum accessible, there's a number of kind of features to do that, to support student needs. If we're talking about disability, it's understanding that someone or a person's got a limitation, which means that if people want to talk about that, well, there's a stigma associated with it, and that's as kind of teaching staff, as a coach, as kind of practitioner, we've got to be aware that students might not want to disclose that limitation. Certainly, kind of on the academic programme, students have got kind of an opt-in if they want to declare that limitation, dyslexia, ADHD, etc., etc. Well, if students disclose it, well, we're in a better position because it's visible and we can see that on their student records. If they don't disclose it, and it's optional, they don't have to, well, then it's that stigma that we don't know what their needs are, if that makes sense. And it's far difficult from our perspective, knowing then how to kind of overcome and meet those needs if we don't know what those needs are.
You find a lot of people don't like to say what their limitations are, and they feel like they need to act like everyone else around them.
We conducted a survey with some of our students, and in one of our modules, in terms of kind of an introductory to the module, we looked at asking kind of a number of questions on the whole cohort. It was fascinating because we had a number of results from that form come back showing that, well, actually 10% of students within that kind of body of research, so in terms of participants, had some form of mental limitation, a disability. But in terms of that 10%, they haven't disclosed it anywhere else. And it's anonymous, we don't know who those are. But it was interesting that comparing that data against what the university have been told and have declared to us, well, they don't match. And it's fascinating that, well, actually we've got a number of students that have or have expressed that they have got that, but haven't disclosed it anywhere else, it's not public. And as a tutor, as an academic kind of lecturer, well, if we don't know what those needs are, we can't meet those needs in the classroom.
If it's not obvious and you can't see it, do you find that people tend to hide it? Is this just a common theme throughout the students you have, that if it's not seen, it's almost not spoken about?
Yeah, and it's probably worth kind of taking it back to kind of the bigger picture in terms of my background. My background is very much in kind of physical activity and health, and before I was at Brookes, I was working kind of the PE spectrum, so looking at physical education and understanding that kind of sphere is a compulsory subject for children up to the age of 16. We're looking at PE obviously as an inclusive subject. Slightly off tangent, I appreciate it, but we'll come back. Sport is the vehicle for PE at the minute, because an outcome or aim objective of PE is that everyone excels in competitive sport. Well, if sport is the vehicle, and we understand that sport is exclusive, it's got a winner and a loser, dictated normally by the stronger, the fitter, the taller, more powerful child, they get more touches on the ball. Well, those children that have kind of got those limitations, arthritis, cerebral palsy, they're not going to feel not necessarily comfortable playing in that sporting environment. Yeah. So if we're looking at an inclusive curriculum, we've got to kind of potentially look at the vehicle for PE. Sport and PE are two separate entities. PE wants to be inclusive, it's got to be engaging for every individual because it's compulsory, and therefore we might need to think about or question the traditional approach to PE. If we're looking at a slightly more kind of alternative, problem-based approach, well, we can set a problem, and children with arthritis, with cerebral palsy, can access that curriculum because they can solve the problem, or they can come up with a creative solution to solving that problem. In terms of students potentially hiding those physical limitations, certainly in the classroom, or on the sports field, or in a primary PE context, if people aren't comfortable, or the task doesn't meet their needs, well, they are going to kind of disengage. They're going to sideline themselves from that learning environment, whether that's primary PE, whether that's secondary PE, whether that's sports, physical activity, or in the classroom. It's important that the provision meets, or the task meets, the needs of the individuals, so they can access it, they can have some sort of success, so they're going to feel more motivated to continue in the future.
You talk about the access and the importance of something that is already, like, everybody has to take part in it. For you, how important is it not only to make it accessible and inclusive, but how important is it to get everybody involved? Why is the inclusion so important? Why should everybody be taking part in sport?
If we're looking at kind of the lower end and sport for participation, for enrichment, for well-being, well, yeah, we want it to be inclusive so everyone can access the benefits from it. We then might need to think about, in terms of kind of the policy underpinning that, well, what is it, what form of league structure, what form of the session means that can be inclusive. It might mean that we need to adapt some of the game rules. We might need to adapt the equipment. It doesn't necessarily need to look like football at that participation level. Well, if we take football out, for example, because to kick a football you need your limbs, left and right feet.
Yeah.
If we take football out, a child or an individual with limb loss can still participate. We might kind of take the ball out, but to play we might say that I've got the ball by putting your hand up. If I'm in possession of the ball, I've got my hand up. To pass it, well, I can't kick the ball because there's no physical concept. To pass it, I might go kick to Tom. You then put your hand up. So we can identify who has the ball. Which the concept of football is still there because it's passing, receiving, we want the ball to shoot. But we've adapted the game to meet those needs of individuals that have got that physical impairment.
A lot of people describe people who are disabled as being less able to do something, and it being harder for them. But we had a really good discussion before we turned the cameras on about that, and I was wondering if, honestly, you could just go back into that, because you described many of these individuals as more able to.
Yeah, and fascinating, because if you're talking about our definition and kind of our understanding of a disability or a limitation, and automatically the assumption is that individual is less able. If we take a practical example, a child has got a physical kind of limitation or impairment, so he's amputated the knee, suddenly moving, walking becomes a real challenge, and therefore they've got to draw upon other attributes. Balance, for example, they've got to now coordinate potentially a stick or to move in a chair. Well, suddenly to access society, to access the world, getting up and down stairs, and you don't realise it, accessing the supermarket or getting off the bus, on the bus, well, suddenly you've got to adapt. And in my view, they're more able because they've had to adapt and they've had to work harder to access that level playing field.
I think it's a great way of looking at it as well, and I think it gives. We've had conversations around this month, and you guys out there will get to see a lot of these pieces on how hard some people have had to work, but it feels like that work they're more powerful. They've got better mental strength than I do. They're stronger physically in their senses. Exactly, and you really want to give them that respect back, because some of the terminology around this it's almost derogatory at times. So it's good, and it's really nice to hear a guy who's teaching disabled students and teaching students how to coach disabled athletes, how to do that.
And taking it back to that point, because in terms of kind of a large element of our degree program is kind of the practical delivery, and it's understanding, well, if you are delivering to a disabled individual person, if they are in a chair, well, what does that kind of distance look like if you're coaching them or working with them? If you're the individual in a chair and as a coach I'm stood up, well, suddenly there's that distance, there's that barrier. but actually it might be that when I come down to their level, it means that I'm caring for that individual. I show signs of kind of engrossment in that individual. It might be kind of adapting our coaching behaviours, teaching behaviours to meet those needs. Likewise, if you've got an individual in a chair in a session, well, actually, can we make that session inclusive by putting an abled body in a chair? So it means that they can kind of access, they can not necessarily experience, but talking about that, but by putting another individual in a chair, it means that, well, actually, the constraints on that environment are the same for that disabled individual in a chair. And it means that, well, actually, the tempo of the game, for example, the speed of that game can be on the same level. So that individual in the chair can engage, can participate, can be included in the session.
Kit, thank you so much for being here with us. Last thing, what is one key takeaway that you'd like our viewers to come away with after this?
Yeah, I think in terms of the purpose of this, raising awareness is really important. The key aspect is understanding and potentially questioning or shifting that current understanding or that discourse. Understanding that, well, actually more people are affected with a disability than we think. We need to accept that as a society, and we need to then recognise how we can then respond to those needs.
Okay, all that's left for me to do is to thank Kit for coming in. Kit, thank you very much. And I just want to say that Brookes Sport are here to keep the conversation going, so please get in touch with us. There are links. Even if you don't know what to do about sport, give us a message. We'll give you a message back, and let's just keep talking during this time. Thank you.